Hello, good morning. Welcome to the video. Today is Wednesday, the 8th day of October 2025, and my name is Michelle Lisa Wills. And this is the second part of my series exposing my personal experiences with, according to Channel 4, the New Landlords from Hell sanctuary housing. Now, in part 1 of my video, I covered about me signing a tenancy agreement back in May 2008, about the electric key fiasco, the B&Q vouchers they gave me to redecorate the place, about the dogs issue, and about the bin store issue. But well, I'm going to start this second part is I touched on it briefly, which was algae, which I couldn't cover in part 1 in full because I want to keep these videos, the series, to a maximum of half an hour roughly, and I was approaching that half an hour mark when I ended part 1, so that's why I didn't go into detail. So that's where I'm going to start with algae. So like with all my videos, because we're going back over 17 years in some cases, the dates are estimated to be roughly around the period I mentioned. So for example, something that I say happened in 2014, it could have been 2013 or 2015. So the real life events, just the dates are, because obviously I didn't document it at the time because I didn't know things would escalate as far as they have. So living in Dawlish, where Charlton House is, by the way, this photo is a picture of the head office in Worcester of Sanctuary Housing Association. So living near the beach, as the crow flies, probably 100 yards from the sea, Charlton House is located. You look out the window, you can see the sea. And I can remember as a kid going to the beach, climbing on the rocks on the beach, and the rocks often had this green algae on it, and if it was wet due to the tide or rain, the algae was incredibly slippery. So the wind, the air, like pollen, covers the algae, the seedlings, whatever you want to call it, the spores of the algae. It goes through the air and has to land somewhere. And in this situation, it landed at Charlton House, or more specifically on the pathways, on the walls, on the external communal areas at Charlton House. Now, at some point, and I'm going to say 2014, approximately, there I was made aware of a situation where a resident, old age pensioner woman, she was dumping some rubbish in the bin store at Charlton House when she slipped and fell, and that resulted in her breaking her wrist. So this was due to the bin store, the floor of a bin store, the paving there was covered in green algae. I contacted Sanctuary Housing to make them aware, because if you imagine that you have a car park at one end of the property, you then have a lower block of flats, that's 17 to 30, which obviously you've got 14 flats, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, all sorts, and you've got people wanting to dump rubbish. So if you're in, let's say, flat 22 in the lower block, so then to get to the bin store, it's right at the other end. So you have to climb up a staircase where like 4 or 5 concrete steps. There's a flat level bit, there are more steps, flat level bit, and then a third lot of steps. Then there's a long flat bit, path, about 30 to 40 feet I estimate long. And this 30 to 40 feet estimated, that goes past the main entrance to the upper block, the block I live in, flats 1 to 16. And that floor, say about 30 feet, we'll say, that was covered in this green algae, as were the walls, the communal external walls were all covered in this green algae. So Sanctuary allegedly, could be true, could be false, I don't know, it's alleged, they sent a health and safety person out to investigate, and his report, which I never saw, it's just hearsay what I was told, was that it was a cosmetic issue, it wasn't dangerous. A few weeks after that happened, I witnessed, I just happened to be looking out my window, and I had a next door neighbour, Tara, lovely girl she was called. I would say Tara was between 40, 45, that sort of age range. She lived with her son. Her son was an adult son, so probably 20, 22 years old, something like that. And they had a dog, a spaniel. And I just happened to look out my window. It was actually, I believe, again, a long time ago from memory, I was looking for the postman because I had a letter which needed signing for. So obviously I was expecting that letter. And so I just happened periodically, roughly the time the postman normally came. And I saw Tara with her dog. The dog sort of was excited, obviously going for a walk. And she was on the pathway leading to the stairway when the dog sort of pooed and she slipped and fell down 4 concrete steps at the top of the steps leading to the lower block. And I've obviously rushed out to check that she was okay. And to be quite honest, I think she was more embarrassed, and felt humiliated, I guess. And I can understand that when she said she was in no pain, like. But I knew enough was enough, I was not prepared for that to continue. I have a conscience, and, my conscience tells me that if I see a dangerous situation, I do nothing, and then someone was to seriously injure themselves or worse, then I'm going to take action. I'm not going to sit on my ass and do nothing. So what I did with a few neighbours, the occupant of flat 1, who since sadly passed away, was a gentleman called Larry, lovely guy. He went out on his motorbike and he had a trailer, and he purchased several litres of bleach, neat bleach. Another neighbour in the lower blocks 17 to 30, they happened, just by coincidence, to have a pressure washer, and yet another neighbour kindly lent me a large hosepipe that they had in their shed. So one Sunday afternoon we decided to do it ourselves. So I did most of the work. As I say, the others provided the materials. Larry did help. Larry scrubbed the walls with his filthy green algae on, where I pressure washed all the pathway. So you're talking, it took all day to do it. The pressure washer wasn't the best. It wasn't as powerful as we needed, but it did the job. It did an okay job. The main job was to make the area safe. So that's what I did, and then I wrote to Sanctuary and sent them a bill. Obviously, we're not paying that, and so I issued court proceedings against Sanctuary Housing. Again, this is 2014-ish. So I issued these legal proceedings against them, and what happened was we settled out of court, and they paid me a sum just short of £500, to which I paid part to Larry for obviously the materials, the bleach. I paid part to the gentleman who lent us a pressure washer, part to a person who lent us the hose pipe, and obviously I kept about half of the money for myself because it was me who did the majority of the work in pressure washing, which took a good 5 or 6 hours on a Sunday morning and afternoon. So they paid out eventually. But it just goes to show about what sort of social housing landlord they are. They don't give a damn. And an example of this, in flat number 6, there lived an elderly lady. She was in her 80s. Lovely lady she was called. I can't remember her name. She lived alone in the flat, and I wouldn't say, I was not aware that she had dementia or Alzheimer's or anything, but she would knock on the door occasionally. It was either my door or another tenant's, her next door neighbour. I lived opposite her on the same level, and would knock on the door occasionally if she was having problems with her television. Television's always going wrong here. And she would knock on the door, or I remember one occasion her light bulb went. She went to switch the light on, and the light bulb blew. And luckily I had a load of spare light bulbs, so I went in and replaced the light bulb for her. Stuff like that, doing neighbourly, kind gestures. That's how it should be. So, but just thinking about this elderly woman, very frail elderly woman, who, if she was walking on this pathway wet and she slipped and fell, broken hip, broken leg, broken arm, who knows what would have happened. And yes, I don't want a medal, I don't want any, but that's the sort of person I am. I like to prevent things from, if I see a potential danger, I want to eliminate that potential danger. So that's the sort of person I am, and that's what I do. So that was that danger. Another situation with sanctuary housing is that alongside our rent we pay service charges. So obviously the service charges, so each, in my case, today's, I was about 10 quid back then. I believe it was 8 quid. Today's service charges are around £12.50, around £12.50-ish a week, or I pay service charges. One person in a small one-bedroom flat, I'm paying £12.50 service charges. That includes maintenance, and as I've shown in previous videos on my other channel, Metman Mornge, when I made a series about my legal claim against Sanctuary, which is still going on, I mentioned these charges, and the tenancy agreement does state that the areas, communal external areas, the pathways, the walls, etc., had to be kept in a good condition, and they want, let's say green algae, mould, holes in the walls, paint peeling off, that, the score. So, but I also remember when I moved in, we'll go way back now to May of 2008, there was a communal television aerial, I believe for both blocks, on the roof, believe it or not. So you're on a 4-storey block of flats, and on the roof of that 4-storey block of flats was a communal television aerial. And part of my service charges were to pay, obviously, my percentage for the upkeep of that area, which was always going wrong apparently. The problem is that I was getting, I don't watch a lot of television, so when I moved in I got broadband installed, and so I get all my television needs. I don't watch BBC or any of that rubbish. I like watching films on Amazon Prime or stuff like that, YouTube videos, etc. That's what I watch, not BBC or ITV or any of that rubbish. So I had a problem with my broadband, and so I went out and bought connections. Obviously, I had a television, a flat screen TV, smart TV, and I went to plug it in. I had no signal, and it turned out that for whatever reason, my flat was not. There was no connection in my flat to the communal television area, and yet they've been charging me, I don't know, let's say £1 a week for the upkeep of that area. And I must have gone 6 months paying it, and I asked for a refund, but of course they refused. And I always remember the guy who came, they called him an expert from Sanctuary. I always remember his name, Mr. Dixon. I always remember Dixon because Dixon's, for those of you of my generation will know, used to have a load of shops, Dixon's, which sold video recorders, television sets, that sort of thing, before computers, obviously. And I, bought stuff from Dixon's, in the 80s, for example. So that's how I remember the name, Mr. Dixon. And at the time, he actually visited with workmen, with contractors, to connect me to the communal area. I'll just go away from the screen. I'll just point you. I'm actually sat in the lounge here. I use it as an office now. So I'll just highlight the video. You can see at the top there. You can see there's like a white rail. I don't know if you can see it between the wall and the top of the ceiling, top of the wall and the ceiling. You see a white rail there, and if I go over to the other side, you can see where it sort of comes down the wall, and if you have a look in the far corner there, you see the television set. It's not even plugged in, so that's the television set. So while we were installing that, my bathroom. So my bathroom door would not close. Don't ask me why. There was, I say, an obvious issue with the bathroom door. Mr. Dixon was stood in the hallway of this flat I'm in now, flat 5, Charlton House, and on his mobile phone he said, "I'll get that sorted. I'll ring the powers that be and get someone to come out and fix your door properly, because it would not shut. The bathroom door would not shut." So he went away. The TV was okay, it connected, it was fine, no problem. And I would say probably within 6 months. So because it wasn't important. But the same problem arose again with my broadband. My broadband was down, and so I had no access to anything to watch, any television or YouTube, or I could obviously get Amazon through my television. So I had nothing. So I wanted to use the area for a few days until the engineer came out to fix the problem with my broadband. And I'm reminded about the door. The door had still not been fixed 6 months afterwards. So when I rang Sanctuary Repairs, I was informed that Mr. Dixon never rang. Nobody ever rang. It was a complete and utter lie. And I knew that to be true. I knew Mr. Dixon was lying, and the reason was simple. And this is what I was told by Motable Networks for mobile phones. Now, this building, Charlton House, the 2 blocks of flats, were built in were finished in 1996. So people started moving in 1996. Prior to that, it was called the Charlton Hotel. So those of you familiar with the area in Dawlish, Exeter Road in Dawlish, Eastcliff Road, will be aware of it being the Charlton Hotel. So, and what's numerous from EE, from Virgin Media, also I believe it was O2 was the other one. They all said the same thing about signals. Because when I made a phone call without my broadband, I literally had to hang out my window to get a signal. And the reason that is because all these are built with metal frames, all these modern flats. And I know 1996 seems a long time ago, but you got a metal, I presume it's steel, a steel structure to the building. That's how they build flats today. Years ago it used to be wood, now it's steel. And the problem with these flats is that it's often difficult, and I know because all the neighbours around here, the ones I speak to, those they have told me they have exactly the same problem, and quite often people who make phone calls have to actually leave the building and go outside because the signal was interrupted by the framework of the actual buildings, the steel or the metal frameworks. So they interfered with the signal. So Mr. Dixon was nowhere near the window. He was in the hallway, and there was no way on earth he could have possibly got a signal. No way on earth. So that's how I knew he was lying. And this is Sanctuary Housing Association. This is what they do. They don't give a damn. And yet, letters. You get the letters. You got a car park, a large car park. I estimate 30 car parking spaces. I haven't counted them up, but I'm going to just say 30. There are white lines for where the cars to park. If someone is parked, say, past the parking bay, individual parking bay, so across one of the white lines, stinking letters come through the post. If somebody, for example, when you come into my block of flats, there is obviously the main entrance door. There's a flat area. There's obviously staircase, and under the staircase there's an area which nobody walks. It's just like a spare area. People, for example, mothers or fathers, who have a pram, a pushchair, whatever. Obviously there are no lifts here, so you're not going to cart a pushchair or pram up 4 flights of steps, up 4 floors for goodness sake. Or people who would come to visit who had a push bike, for example. I know yesterday there was a push bike there, perfectly safe, out the way, no harm to man the beast, doing nothing. So you'd often get letters like that. And of course people in blocks of flats, you get all sorts. You get wonderful people and not so wonderful people, shall we say. And for example, at the weekend I noticed someone had dumped a large double or king size bed, the actual base, the mattress and other bits and pieces, just dumped it by the car park. So obviously that will involve another stinking letter probably coming through the post from Sanctuary Housing, and that'll be a reminder, and the usual nonsense, so because Sanctuary then have to pick it up themselves. They don't know where it come from, who's dumped it there, and they say the money will be taken at the scheme, and then the service charge will go up as a result, which is ridiculous. But it proves one thing to me, and what it's all about. It's all about money. Money, money, money. If you're, a week late, the threatening letters come with your rent. I mean, for example, I know some people, I was actually dealing with a case unrelated to Sanctuary only a couple of days ago about a person who, they switched over from one benefit to another. I believe it's sickness benefits onto universal credits. They call it migration or something. I'm not totally clued up. I've never claimed benefits in my life, so I'm not 100% clued up with the benefits system. But I know enough, and I do a bit of research. And what often happens, and it does say in my tenancy agreement, rent shall be paid on a Monday, weekly, in advance. So what these housing associations expect. So let's say you're a single person. Let's say you're a 30-year-old young woman in a one-bedroom flat, living on her own, and she is unemployed. So she's getting, I don't know, unemployment benefit. Let's say £100 a week. I don't know what, which is universal credit. She gets her housing benefit paid and other bills. Now, I know with the local council, which in my case is Teambridge, that, and I know that universal credit, because I come across this 2 days ago with a friend of mine in Newton Abbot, because I rang his housing association, which is Teen Housing. It's not the same housing association. They like the, obviously, universal credit in this case, pay monthly in arrears, where the tenancy agreement says you need to pay weekly in advance, which the two aren't compatible. One of them has to give way. And so most of the people, most decent landlords, will know we'll get their money. It's coming from the state, for goodness sake, from benefits. And so there shouldn't be an issue. But some landlords do. And Sanctuary is one of them. So, if you're late, even if you're on benefits, they write to people who are on benefits, say they're 4 weeks in arrears because they pay monthly in arrears. They'll write letters, and what they like to do is they want people such as the example of the young woman and a 30-year-old woman unemployed living alone in a one-bedroom flat. They want her to use her benefits to pay, to make sure her rent is always a month in advance. So and she won't see that money until she leaves. It's ridiculous, isn't it? It's an absolute scandal. And what makes me really angry, frustrated, and I'm trying hard not to swear here. It's deplorable, and the worst thing about it is they're a charity. All housing associations in the UK are registered charities, non-profit organisations. So any profits they make, they have to plough back into the business. Repairs, doing up houses, building new houses, obviously paying wages and that, and so we're not allowed to make any profit. But that's all. That's all it's about. A charity. I always understood a charity. Let's take Barnardo's. Just pluck that out of the air, Barnardo's. They're supposed to help, I believe, children in the UK and throughout the world. You take, cancer charities, Red Cross, Salvation Army, all these charities that go begging for money, they do it for a reason, to help people. And yet, these people, the likes of Sanctuary, they intimidate people, they threaten people. And I know that I've been to court with my issues with Sanctuary. I've appeared in person at the Torquay and Newton Abbot County Court on 4 separate occasions. 3 in 2024, which I documented on my other channel, and 1 on the 23rd of June this year. And when you are in the waiting room, waiting for your case to be heard, waiting for the judge, there's a notice board, and every single occasion. You look at the list, there's I think 3 courtrooms, so 3 judges sitting potentially at the court at the same time, and they have a list. Court 1, a list about half a dozen cases, Court 2, a list about half a dozen cases, and Court 3, a list of half a dozen cases. And I would say at least 30–40% of those cases, because I've looked every time, have involved, it's always sanctuary housing versus somebody. And as in my previous videos, it costs an enormous amount of money to take someone to court. So that non-profit, the profits they're making of filling the pockets of legal people, barristers, solicitors, etc. And it's an absolute shambles. It's an absolute disgrace. So we've come up just past the half-an-hour mark, so I'm going to leave part 2 there. And I want to first of all apologise for the shocking quality of the video. As I explained previously, I'm not a video maker, I'm not a filmmaker. I don't have any equipment whatsoever. I'm literally holding a laptop. This sanctuary picture is on a laptop, and I'm holding a tablet and making this video on a tablet device. So to me, it's always about what the video is about. The content of the video to me is the message I'm getting across, not the quality. So I apologise, for the shocking quality. But please feel free even, if you wish, to comment in the comment section down below. And I want to say to everyone, thank you for watching this video.